Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. Our guest today is one of the most prominent thinkers in the space of developer first security, Travis McPeak. Travis has built his career at the intersection of security automation and developer productivity with a resume that includes security leadership roles at some of the biggest names in tech: Symantec, IBM, Netflix, and Databricks. While at Netflix, he was instrumental in developing the paved road philosophy, a concept that has shaped many modern AppSec programs. He is also the creator of a well known open source tool like RepoKit for automating AWS least privilege, and a code developer of Pandit, the Python static analysis tool. Most recently, he was a founder and CEO of Resourcely, a startup built on the idea of making cloud infrastructure secure by default. And now he's taken on what may be his biggest challenge yet: securing Cursor, the AI powered code editor that is fundamentally changing how developers write software. He's also a prolific speaker and OAS Bay Area chapter lead. Travis, welcome to the show. We are super excited to have you here.
Hey, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Is there anything else you wanted to add to that introduction?
Nope, sounds good.
Okay, so let's get straight into it. Um, you were the founder and CEO of Resourcely, a company built to solve secure by default infrastructure. And now with your move to Cursor, with you being brought in to lead security for an enterprise readiness push, can you walk us through that transition of how it has been so far, and what are some challenges you've seen, and what are some things you're excited about, generally speaking?
Yeah, so in general, there are different kinds of being acquired. I thought when I started Resourcely that, you either failed or you were acquired and, hopefully you become rich and you're buying, yachts and nice cars and things like that. And I learned that actually, like a lot of acquisitions are not that way. And so, for example, there is an acqui-hire where the acquiring company does not want any of your technology or customers. They literally just want the employees. And that's what happened for us. The Resourcely company was not successful because the product did not have enough demand for it. I There's a lot of reasons why that happened that I didn't know at the time that I do now. In general, infrastructure uh, for security people care about it, but they often are not in a position to actually affect it. Um, that kind of drives to the type of people that work in security and like their familiarity with tech. But really, like cloud is not at the same level as like vulnerability management, for example. And I think a big part of the reason for that is actually compliance. Compliance hasn't kept up well with the cloud. And so since compliance is not measuring it, aside from nice visibility solutions, like security does not meaningfully engage in cloud as much as I thought they would. So that's like a very, very high level. So, at the time, we tried many different things to make that work. And once it became clear that I had tried literally everything possible, um, from selling to infrastructure engineers instead of security, like different messaging, make the product easier, make the product like different form. So by the time I got to the end of that, Cursor had grown like extremely rapidly, like probably the fastest growing company ever. And they, have now a product that like a year before, like it was a small team that built it and they now have like serious customers and they wanted to have, people that could build the kind of security that like serious customers expect. And so that's why they acquired me, is to help them come and help with security here. And it has been a really fun journey. The type of work that we're doing here is a mixture of new things that we have in AI as well as just foundational basics. So all of the normal like bread and butter AppSec, CloudSec, detection and response, CorpSec, all of that is within the remit, and we have a team that are generalists and kind of cover all of that. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully it kind of gives you a tee into like how I got here.
Yeah. No, that's a great answer. And I think I was speaking to a friend of mine who also runs a cloud security company, and he told me something really interesting, which kind of mirrors with what you said as well. He mentioned that around the time of the pandemic, when cloud security was really quote unquote hot, there were apparently over 1,200 vendors who identified themselves as being in the cloud security space, and less than 200 remain today. Right. And that was kind of
That's wild.
surprising to me. I was like, okay, that's 1/6, right? And I can't think of another area in security where we've had a dramatic reduction in number of the companies working in the space. Right. So yeah, so I think what you say checks out. And I think the reasoning you mentioned makes a lot of sense as well. There are a lot of infrastructure security sits with infra teams, whereas AppSec kind of moves across AppSec and developers, which is kind of a larger pool of people. But yeah, no, that is definitely an interesting take. And I kind of feel like an acqui-hire is actually a great exit as well, simply because you kind of get a little bit of the best of the both worlds, because you did run your company, you have an agency, and then when you go into a company as an internal security team, you have a lot more empathy, for the developers who are there as well, who are also building stuff. So yeah, I think I think that's a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. I do not regret any part of Resourcely. Like, I
Mm,
enjoyed most of it. There's definitely like hard parts of it. It, showed me that I have skills that I didn't know I had. Like, I can get through like really hard stuff and stay calm and,
mm,
lead a team through all of that. So, and I learned a ton. I will definitely start a company again. When I do start another company, I will be like at least 10x better, just because I already know the things that I know now. So
mm,
yeah, like absolutely no regrets. And then what you said about the dramatic reduction in cloud, like, I believe that. It's also a
mm.
wild statistic, and I think that
Yeah.
it really just kinda shows how, like, compliance-minded we are as an industry because, you could have, by infrastructure configuration, public databases, and that happens all the time. Like, there's
Mm.
for a while when I was running the company, it seemed like multiple times a week, there's an announcement like, "Oh, this database is on the internet." Like, you know, we forgot to do the load balancers correctly. And that is not treated as like "Oh, we need to, like, go and
Security
fix
incident.
this by security." Yeah, but you could have a CVSS 6.5 and some, like, unimportant thing over here, and it's like, "Nope, you're gonna fix that, and you're gonna prove that you fixed it on the timeline that you told everyone you would do."
Yeah. No, I'm
Yeah,
with you. I
I
think yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, I think this is a good starting point of this discussion, Travis. And so, help me understand, like like secure by default or secure by design, however you want to put it, right? Like it's something that we as security engineers have held close to our heart, and that's something that at least we've strive to achieve, right? And so like you mentioned, right, like it's just not easy to do that because there's so many nuances, there's so many edge cases, there's also the compliance angle to it, which you mentioned. um do you really believe that with AI now sort of basically revolutionizing, changing the way software is getting built, uh, secure by default is actually a possibility now, in the sense that we should no longer hold ourselves to just kind of being compliant anymore, right? Like we can actually bake in the security guardrails that we've always wanted to. Do you feel like we are moving in the right direction, so to speak?
Yeah, 100%. That's actually, aside from Cursor being a great company and the AI space being very exciting, and, when I met this team, I realized it was the single, like, densest collection of the best talent that I've ever seen in my life. So, like, those are
Mm.
all reasons that I joined, but, like, it really the biggest reason I joined is it's the best way to continue the mission I had, which is, I think that this, like, reactive nature that we've always been in security is we're playing whack-a-mole, we're not doing it fast enough, we're falling behind, and the only way to actually, like, do anything sustainable is, like, you have to shift it all the way left. And, one of the reasons that Resourcely was unsuccessful is because most security people do not wanna go and, like, engage with developers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But like one of the biggest ones is just they don't have the talent to do it. Like they're not technical
Mm.
enough to go in and like engage with developers. But now in AI, like you really don't have to, because you know AI tools are already so good that like developers want to use them and are using them. And then if you give AI the right kind of context about like your secure design building blocks and like foundations of what good looks like, it's happy to adjust to those things. So I think it's the best injection point to like really carry on the mission that I started Resourcely for in the first place.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, before I move on, Sandesh, do you have any follow-up questions to
Yeah,
that?
yeah. No, I kind of want to kind of think aloud about that, right? So about what you just said. I think we're, by the way, big users of cursors within CISO as well. Love the IDE, love kind of the work it did, and I kind of feel like we wouldn't have been able to build the startup we have in the last 2 years, but for Cursor and Cloud Code and all the other tools, right? Simply because the amount of productivity that's gone up is dramatic. And and something you said about security folks not being able to engage with developers, I've seen that firsthand when I used to head security at a fintech before, where the reality is that it's almost like application security by application security teams, and application security by developers are almost two different things, right? And I think what Cloud Code is doing, what Cursor is doing, what secure by default things you can do with Cursor rules and all that, I think is sometimes people think of saying, oh, this replaces AppSec. And I'm like, it actually does not. It kind of makes AppSec's life simpler. But what it definitely does is kind of raise the bar on developer security, right? I kind of remember the closest we could get to something like secure by default or, automated PR generation, etc., was when Dependabot would upgrade version numbers on vulnerable versions of libraries. And that was a terrible experience for developers because they're just like, hey, do you know the downstream impact of just changing the number from 3.09 to 3.10? And they were so frustrated when security engineers did that. Now you can have the same elegant experience, but with like much better fidelity if you kind of work with tools like Cursor and they're doing automated PR generation. So I kind of feel like the life of application security may or may not change that much, but the bar kind of can very easily be raised on developer-led security, thanks to the amazing work being done by all these AI-powered IDs.
Yeah, the thing you said about Dependabot, that is so typical security, right? It's like the hard part of this was not bumping making a PR to bump the version. Like that's not the hard part. The hard part is making sure that like when you actually deploy that, it's not breaking things. So like,
exactly.
It's like here's security like helping with like automated PRs that like anybody that gets one of those is like, okay, wow, I need to like really drink my coffee and like figure out if this is going to break things. The but I think the nature of AppSec is for sure going to change with AI stuff, but like a lot of things that I would have considered like unscalable and like not a good strategy before, I think will become good strategies. For example, threat modeling. Like I think threat modeling, like I've never bothered with it unless something's like very important, just because like I've been part of a team before. Like we did full-time threat modeling and it was just a grind. Like we would meet with developers and like our information's immediately out of date. It's like imperfect. They don't understand how it works either. Like half of the session is like us just trying to come to a common understanding of like what's actually been built. And now like with AI, like it can go like pull a ton of like first day I got here, I asked Cursor, like draw me an architecture diagram. And then I asked Henry, my colleague, like, is this right? And he's like, that is right. So, I mean, that kind of like just ability to like on demand generate like how the system actually works by tracing through code is like that makes stuff like threat modeling like actually applicable now. And similarly, like we're talking about upgrades, like, it will do a much better job of like triaging the impact of like what it is that you're upgrading, so now you have like more signal on it.
Yeah, and I run a company which automates security design reviews and threat modeling using LLMs. And the hardest part of selling our product has actually been convincing people that it's actually possible to scale threat modeling and design reviews, right? People are so jaded and so given up to saying it's impossible to do it, that unless you've tried it, it's very hard to believe that it's actually possible to do it. And once you do, and once you see the light, whether you build it internally or you buy from a vendor or use an open source product, it's now very clear that there are problems which can be very easily saved and scaled as well. And I'm sure Anshuman has some questions on paved road and all the Netflix stuff that you guys worked on. But yeah, some of those are very easy to do as well today, with Cursor rules and things like that, which is very, very hard to enforce, say, 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah. And like, let's say that we're actually doing a design review and I ask you to change something, like that is can be a big trade-off, right? Like if we're at a late stage and I'm asking you to like, change something that's like pretty fundamental to the architecture, like that's a ton of work. And so even if the issue is significant, you might say, I don't know, I can't do that. Let's ship and then we'll do it later. But, AI will help make those kind of changes. And then if you just ask upfront, like, hey, we're going to be like implementing this, like whatever, like web form input and whatever, we need to make sure that we're safe against cross-site scripting. Like that's the kind of thing that AI is like, okay, I've seen, how that's done before. I'll just do it in the right way. And then the other bit is like the review agent. So like I use Bugbot here. Bugbot catches issues like all the time for me, and those are legit issues. And like similarly, when I'm using AI coding, like I'll catch issues that it does, and I'm like, "Why'd you do it that way? Explain it to me. Do it this way instead." So it's really like having a full time, like rubber duck partner to
Yeah.
like bounce all of the stuff out of. And I think that like in aggregate, that part of security is going to get a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also want to share a use case with Cursor that I've personally been a huge fan of. So, um, I use Cursor to triage certain complex vulnerabilities, especially if things like authorization, authentication flaws that span multiple code bases, right? And the way I kind of go about it is I add all the code. Well, first I clone all the repos locally, and then I add those folders in a workspace inside Cursor, right? And then I ask the Cursor agent to basically say that, look, this is the vulnerability. These are the details. You have access to all the code repositories. They are all added in the workspace. Now kind of think through why this could be a true positive or not, right? And some of the insights I've had through them, right, like there've been instances where I've gone to the engineering team and I've told them like, look, this looks like a possible finding. Can you please look at the analysis? And they come back to me and they are like, I don't think it's a true positive. And then I ask Cursor, like, can you sort of help me understand why it's not? And then Cursor gives me an insight, and then I go back to the engineering team and they're like, holy shit, this is true. So,
Mhm.
like these are kind of some experiences that I just haven't had before. And I think part of it is because I just didn't have those skills in the first place to be able to, go through multiple code bases or trace data flows from one function to the other. And Cursor has made it so much more easier now, right? So, and I feel like these are some advanced use cases where I think folks are still getting used to the Cursor ID itself. But yeah, I mean, absolutely, like in terms of AI and AppSec and like AI powered IDEs, I think AppSec is one of the domains in the security space that that has to be innovated, like which hasn't. We have seen that for so long. So yeah, absolutely.
Y
Speaking about AI
I
and AppSec, yes, go ahead.
one more for that. So, yeah, I mean, I produce code, and, like,
Yeah.
it's, like, I care about doing security, and it's embarrassing for me if I produce something that has vulnerabilities. So, even on small things, I'll just pop it out, and I'll say, like, "Okay, like this block, like what could go wrong with it?" Like basically like, come up with like a test plan, and like it'll do like fuzzing and whatever. And like maybe it, you know, seeing the ones that it generates like gives me an idea. I'm like, what about these? Like go generate like more of those. And so like you can just cover so much ground so quickly that it like lowers the bar on like putting on your security thinking cap, where before, that would be like a big deal because it's going to take you like 4 hours. And now you can like do like a mini spike of it in like 5 minutes. And like in those cases, security will end up like much better.
Yeah, I guess I do have a follow up question to this, right? Like, and I think based on my conversations with my peers and other folks, I think the biggest question folks have is, yes, we can use Cursor in uh, these different ways, right, to sort of produce or help security to test and what have you. But at what point do you draw a line where you don't trust the output shown by Cursor, right? Like, what is that verification layer? Like, is there a better way of how you go about it, Travis, that sort of gives you the assurance that, even if you're not editing and looking at each piece of the code that Cursor generates, you're still confident that whatever it's doing kind of makes sense?
Yeah, so I mean, this is something I talk to a lot of people about. Like, cursor aside, like a fundamental like limitation of LLMs today is that they want to make you happy. And like they're going to tell you like whatever it is they need to make you happy. So like if they have the right answer, they're going to give you that. If they don't have the right answer and they can't figure it out, they're going to tell you something anyway. So like I take every single thing from an LLM as like a starting point, and like I consider it done when I understand it. But what's nice is like instead of me having to go like, look through docs and like validate its correctness, I'm like, prove that thing that you did here. Like, show me the docs, show me the like relevant snippets. Like, I want links. I want to look at it myself. And like sometimes just even telling it, like, go look at the docs is enough for it to realize itself that it's wrong. And it'll say, okay, you're right. Like, I didn't actually know about that. Like, let me go like think about it more. But basically, like when I use AI to develop software and use Cursor, like the LLM is doing parts of it that make me faster, but like I ultimately end up like owning all of the code I produce. Like if I make a PR and merge it, like that's my code, and like I need to understand that thing like end to end. And oh, I didn't look at that because like the LLM wrote it, and like I just kind of assumed it was fine. It's not gonna it's not gonna pass, right? Like people are gonna say, well,
Yeah.
like no, you made it. So I strip it down and like understand all of the code that I'm producing to like first principles. And because it's so fast, you can, and there's no dumb questions with LLMs, right? You can say like, I don't understand this bit. Like, why did you do it this way? Like, explain line by line. Like dumb it down even more. Like, explain it like I'm 5. Explain it like I'm 2. Like, you can just keep asking questions until like you understand stuff. And the net impact for me is that like I produce code that like much faster than I did without it. And also I understand it much better because it lowers the bar on me saying like, okay, actually like I don't understand this bit. Like I want to look at docs. Like it'll go pull all the docs and like put it into like a short summary digest, and I can, double click on it with questions on anything that I want to know more about.
Yeah. I, I mean, we're all like AI optimists here, at least in the coding, in the coding use case, and I'm one of them too. But if I had to play devil's advocate, I think the one problem with this, what we're talking about is that it makes really good developers, really thoughtful developers much, much better. It makes a Travis or an Anshuman write better code, more secure code faster. But it also hides a lot of bad behavior by people who don't do any of this thing and just wipe code their way through. And it gets increasingly harder to determine which was what. And I think to Travis's point, yeah, in the end, you got to hold the developer, I guess, human accountable for the code that's written, no matter how much of it is written by the LLM. But yeah, I think, and to me, that's kind of going to be the role of AppSec teams going forward. It's not so much review the results from SemGrep on every PR, because that's going to be too much, and then you're gonna start having to trust the developers, give them the tools to do this better. But if there were 300 things that happened yesterday, which of the 17 things do I need to dive into as an application security engineer, and why those 17? And it may not always be because these were the riskiest changes, but it may be that, hey, it was written by developers who've been writing code for 3 months, right? And maybe they used LLMs wrongly, right? I almost feel like we have AppSec engineers today have a mental model of what is risky, and that mental model has to change, because now what's risky may be not based on just what the feature is, but also who wrote the code, how they interacted with the LLM, and what the metadata is. So for instance, like Travis mentioned, that if you wrote a piece of code and if you can generate cursor metadata on what were the questions asked and what was the back and forth between the human and the LLM, that can give you a pretty good sense of how mature the developer is and how much thought they put into security. And then based on that, you may want to do additional reviews. I don't know how this plays out. Obviously, I'm making these things up in their head, but I kind of feel like we need different kinds of metadata to figure out where security teams need to be involved, as opposed to just letting the developers do whatever they need to do.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different parts of this. So, AI is a huge tool, like probably the most like impactful tool that we've seen, in a long time, like definitely since the internet. Um, and that's going to allow everybody to do more things, right? So, I can write code faster, that I understand more. Everybody can produce more code. So, like from a strictly like, you know, we used to have X lines of code, and now there's 5X lines of code because people are doing it more. And then if you assume like a flat defect rate, then like, strictly speaking, like our job in security has gotten worse. But now, like if we introduce, the ability for developers that want to actually like be better in security, because like LLMs, will come up with some of it themselves, and developers will notice gaps in the LLM. So now you have 2 minds, which is going to be strictly better than one. Like maybe the defect rate goes down. And then at the same time, there's like the meta level game, right? So we as defenders, like if we're using the tools correctly, can cover a lot more ground. Like I've done more work here in the last 6 months than I would have done in like 3 or 4 years in like another organization. Partly because I'm more experienced now, but partly because I have this like wonderful tool and I can cover ground. But like same thing's true for the attackers, right? Like now we can have like vibe coded malware where like people that wouldn't have been able to produce like a exploit kit can now do that. So it's like really interesting to watch all of the various players like learning to use the tools well. And then there's like whole new things that like were not really possible before. So if we went from like X code to 5X code, we're going to have to be more selective about where we get involved, to your point. But we also have like these agents that can go and like look at things, like infinitely, right? Like you can have it like look at all of the code and say like, I'm really interested in these kinds of things and these kinds of changes. And when you see them, I'd like to be like brought into the loop on it. So like that's just strictly new advantage that we never had before. So I think it's, we're all figuring out how to use it for both good and bad, I guess.
Yeah. There's also something you mentioned, Travis, that I want to dig into a little bit more deep. So, like you mentioned that the kind of work that you've been able to do at Cursor right now, it has taken you like maybe half the time that it would have taken you otherwise if you didn't have Cursor or if you weren't working at Cursor. Now, I think for senior engineers, this makes sense because I've had similar experiences where I could use AI coding tools to kind of do build POCs and kind of build features and whatnot. But for junior engineers, right, and this is something that I've found quite a people debate about is, if junior engineers start to rely too much on these tools, right, it actually kind of hampers their learning experiences. And it's not necessarily junior engineers. Like if you just take LLMs in general, if you just take AI in general, there have been some studies that came out, like recently, where people who use ChatGPT on a daily basis to sort of help them through their daily life, I think their sort of brain development. I think there's some study about how it's not, uh, progressing at the same pace as otherwise it would have been if they didn't use ChatGPT. So if we translate that into engineering, right, like, and if we compare that, if we compare junior engineers versus like senior engineers, what are you seeing and what advice do you have for junior engineers so that they actually use these coding tools to the best of the capabilities?
Yeah, so I think really the difference comes down to like how do you see AI? Is it like I'm just going to ask a question and then I'm going to take the answer that it gives me at face value? Like I would not recommend that to anybody. Like I said, AI will say whatever it needs to say to make you happy, and like hopefully it's the right answer. But like if it doesn't have the right answer, it'll give you an answer regardless. So I think that having a skeptical mindset about it and like using it as a starting place for questions, given that like you can interrogate it endlessly, is actually like should be huge advantage for junior engineers to learn. Like the biggest job of junior engineers is to gain experience and wisdom and learn things. So you have this like, infinitely customizable tool. Instead of having to like go read things on the internet for like 6 hours, you can have it like pull the stuff for you to read. And, I didn't understand this thing, like go get me more data, like all that kind of stuff. So I think it should be great. And I think the problem is just going to come from, um, you know, whether it's junior engineers or anybody else that's like, all right, I asked a thing, AI gave me something. It looks like a lot. I don't really want to like think too much about it. It's probably right. And then they ship it. Like they're going to have a bad time no matter what.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with both of you here, right? I mean, the analogy I like to give is that when social media first came out, and especially Instagram and TikTok first came on the scene, I think a lot of people who were maybe like early teenagers and young people struggled with kind of all the overwhelming nature of the dopamine hits and everything. But then when I talk to people in my family who are much younger right now, they've kind of figured out a way to do this right. They've kind of figured it out that saying, hey, 3 days before I have an important exam, I'm going to log out of Instagram. There are controls they have in place on when to use it. They can have flags on figuring out what kind of users you should not be following on Instagram because that's not going to work out for them, etc. Right? So I kind of feel like if every generation they kind of get used to tools. Like I mean, I'm maybe dating myself here, but when I grew up, there was no reliable internet in my house until I was a teenager. Right? I mean, that's how old I am, right? But then I had to get used to reliable internet in a way that people in my family who grew up to 15 years later didn't have to because they were born with it, right? And they use it very differently from the way I did when I started up. So my sense is, and we hire interns at CISO. I know we work with a lot of really young people, and the way they use ChatGPT and Cursor and Cloud Code is so different from how we use it, right? So my sense in the end is they're going to be people who are going to use it well, and they're going to be people who use it badly. What may need to change internally is kind of how we teach folks. I kind of feel like one of the things that has changed dramatically is that we were talking to somebody today, and one of the questions is if you're like 18 or 20 and graduating college for the first time, there's so much you can do without talking to people, right? And I think the real skill they'll probably lose is how to go to have an uncomfortable conversation with somebody who spent 10 years in the company and you just knew. That may be like a skill that we'll actually lose rather than coding, because they can still find out how to write code or what information is around. So I don't have a good answer for how this will change things, but my guess is that there'll be people who use the technology really well, and there'll be the ones who use it badly, and the former will go places with this.
Yeah, I think as long as you use it like a tool and not like you're delegating, your brain, then it's going to work out well. So like you can make the same analogy. Yeah, I'm also old like you. So, I had like when I was a kid, I had like a dial-up connection. Somebody would call and it would, it would drop. And I'm off the internet now. I remember the first time I downloaded anything, it was like a 24K file. It took like an hour, and like somebody called in the middle like the first time and it dropped. But things got faster. And so the analogy here is like, you know, when I was like 5 or 10, like you'd have to like go to the library and like hope that they had a book on like whatever it is that you wanted. And then it's like, okay, we don't have to do that anymore. There's like search, but the web's kind of sparse. And then now it's like there's search and it's fast and like the web's huge. And we have like, aggregation sites like Wikipedia. Like the same argument was made when Wikipedia was there. It's like, oh, kids aren't using their brain anymore when they write like reports in school. They're just like quoting Wikipedia stuff. But like I think the kind of like nature of work changes then, right? It's like, yeah, okay, we have perfect information. The exercise is not going to the library and like finding the encyclopedia that you need. The exercise is, yes, we have
Judgment.
Wikipedia. How do you fact check it? Like, how do you know that it's right? Like, what kind of like logical blocks can you tie together to make something that's not just like you copy pasting Wikipedia?
Yeah, no, I'm so glad we sort of went deep into this particular conversation because I think that was much needed. Speaking about AI AppSec tools, Travis, a few days ago, I reposted a LinkedIn post from Jyoti Bansal. I think he's a co-founder and CEO of Harness. I don't quite understand what Harness is doing, but I think they have some kind of a software delivery platform. And I think the point that Jyoti was trying to make was that, I think in this AI era, having a platform providing a bunch of different like services or offerings is much more beneficial and kind of helps you create your moat, so to speak, as compared to single point solutions, right? And I basically reposted saying that I agree with that because I feel like that's where we are heading towards. And I think you commented on that post saying that you disagree. So I really want to get into this and try to understand, like, because I feel like it's not as straightforward. Like there's no black and white. There's a lot of nuances here which might get lost in translation. So I would like to understand why you think that going the platform route isn't necessarily going to be the moat for new vendors.
Yeah, so this is a great topic. And yeah, it's definitely not black and white. There's, pros and cons of both. And it really like I think the nuance comes down to like what kind of a platform are we talking about? So if it's like AWS, like it's a great platform, right? There's a whole bunch of services, they interop. I have like one set of, auth N and auth Z on top of it. And like there's permissions that cover everything. Like that's like a really nice platform. And like when new things show up in AWS, like it's strictly beneficial. Like I don't have to use it, but it's there. And like I will, pay if I do end up using it at like some predictable rate. Like that would be like an example of like a really good and powerful platform. And in those cases, like, yeah, I do think that there's an advantage because let's say that, I have data in AWS that service A produced and I want service B to go read it. Like that's all easy because we have S3 and like tie them together. I think the bad kind of platforms are like, a lot of companies start off and they do like one thing really well. Like they're, world class at it and then they become successful. And then it's like at some point they need to keep growing and like they've mostly saturated the market. Like they've sold as much of that thing as they're going to sell. And so now they need to expand to other areas. And I've seen a lot of cases where the quality really drops then. And so it's like, yes, we have a platform, but like really it's this like amalgamation of like third or fourth best tools that are like stitched together. And my main point is that in an AI world, the downside of having like point solutions is you have to manage more vendors, but also you have to do integrations to like move things around. And I've found that like AI development like really makes the integrations thing easier. And so for me particularly, like when I'm evaluating security tools, it's really important to solve the problem that I'm trying to solve. I don't just like, buy like all the Gartner acronyms. I'm like, oh, I need a, CSPM and a CNAP and an ASPM and a whatever. Like I come into it, trying to solve some problem. And the problem that I'm trying to solve is like whatever is most highest leverage and like most important in the business at that time. So like I put in effort, I solve this problem. That means like X in risk reduction. And then it's like, okay, now I have a buy versus build. So I could probably build anything, but it's like probably not worth it if it's not specific to my business. So something like vuln management. It doesn't make any sense for me to come up with like my own vulnerability feed of data. Like I would just buy a vuln management solution. And so the question is like, do I get like a giant platform that does it and I'm going to get all this other stuff and pay for things I don't want? And like maybe the vuln management thing is good, but like all the rest of the stuff is not good and I don't end up using it and it's cruft. And I still have to care about it. Or I get like the best vuln management thing that I can possibly get I buy just that one thing. Like if the vendor has a platform, I don't pay for the rest of any of the modules. And then I use AI to create the kind of integration that I need to like wire it into like my operationalization system. So like the vulns come in, I need to do something to them, chop, dice, like filter out, and then I need to put them somewhere that like we can actually action. And like that kind of integration, like that's what platforms typically provide. And like I don't need it because I don't want to go like log into some like walled garden. I want like the vulns to be in the place that I need them to like operationalize for my environment. So I know that was a lot, but like that's kind of
No,
the reason I disagreed with what you said.
yeah, no, and like I think there's a couple of directions or branches I want to go here. So the first is, I totally understand the point that AI helps in integration. So if we get two best tools, if we get like SaaS tool that is really good at SaaS, if we get a SCA tool that is really good at SCA, and as security engineers we could use AI to integrate them. I totally get it, but I think the problem there is, teams look at vendors to sort of augment them because they might not have the skills in the first place to use AI to integrate them. And I think that's where we are right now, where security engineers are just ramping up their AI skills so that they can integrate stuff, right? So I think in that particular case, at least in my opinion, I think teams would rather prefer sort of a platform that could help them with SaaS and SCA, right? Because if they're going to integrate or if they're going to use AI to build that like integration, right? It is the same question about build versus buy, right? Because they would be responsible for maintaining it, managing it, keeping it up to date. And I think that's the exact problem that they're trying to get away from, right? So that's one thing. The other thing, yeah, so I think the fact that AI is there for everybody, right? So what is stopping from, let's say, a SaaS vendor to use AI to start introducing some SEA capabilities into them using AI, right? Since they already have the data of their customers, since they already work well or know what their customers want and their pain points, what is stopping some of these vendors to sort of add additional capabilities and kind of slowly expand into a platform offering multiple solutions? So feel free to go into either direction,
Yeah.
but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. So do you mind if I jump in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, go
please.
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I think about this every day because I run a company and I need to think about whether we are a platform or a point solution and all that. Honestly, ever since I've been in application security, which was like I think 15 years ago, I've been hearing there's consolidation coming in the security industry. Like this has been a thing with every wave. The cloud came, there's going to be consolidation. AI is here, there's going to be consolidation, right? And it hasn't happened, and maybe it'll happen someday, right? I think the decision to become a platform, or I'm putting on the vendor hat now and not like the practitioner hat, right? Becoming a platform or a point solution is a purely business decision and not so much a product decision, right? Like Travis mentioned, if you're a platform, you want to have you want to have some way where using multiple parts of your platform has some kind of a compounding effect for you, and that building one product and the other product has some overlap because of which your maintenance cost goes down, etc., right? So or you're selling to the same ICP, because of which your sales cycle on the second product is much shorter than the sales cycle on the first product. There has to be some alpha because of which the second product makes more sense in addition to the first product. And that's pretty hard to find in security, to be honest, right? SaaS and SEA may seem very similar products from a user perspective, but from a vendor perspective, SEA is a database product. Right, you have to have the database of every vulnerable software. Like, so it's the core skill of a supply chain security product is to ability to build world-class databases and getting world-class sources and keeping them up to date and keeping them low latency. Whereas in SaaS, it's more about having your ability to build an AST really well, or OCaml, or finding ways to kind of like go deep into the code or write really cool rules, right? So, but from a developer perspective, hey, you're either reviewing first-party code or third-party code. So they're actually very different products, which is why every company which does SaaS plus SEA either does SaaS really well or SEA really well, and then they kind of like try to kind of struggle to do both. I mean, with enough money and resources, you can probably do both. But I think that's kind of the point, right? So I think I I don't think the bottleneck for building security platforms was ever how much code you can write. That was never the bottleneck, right? The companies who've built fantastic platforms, like say Palo Alto Networks, have done it without having to write a whole lot of code because they just acquired they've got an acquisition machine which lets them build a platform. In which case, also you don't need to write code because somebody else already written the code. You just got to acquire them, right? Again, I'm not commenting on Palo Alto's effectiveness. I'm just saying from a business. I feel like platform building is a much harder business problem than it is a product problem. And the ones who win will actually crack that, which is why Amazon's a fantastic platform because they understand the business of building platforms. Sorry, I know it went
Yeah,
in the third
definitely.
direction, but yeah.
No. Yeah, I mean, I also like that direction. Like, it is a business decision. I agree,
Yeah.
and everything I'm speaking for here is like how I feel about it, and like my specific use cases. So like, I want the problem solved, and I want it to be solved like the best. And like, vendors can be a pain to deal with, but like part of running the company is like I figured out how like vendor and procurement and all of that stuff works. So like, it's easy and fast here. And like, I don't pick vendors that I feel like are going to be painful to deal with. So like, I've disqualified that. Like, they're
Hmm.
it's going to be, well formed, and like they're going to be responsive when I need them. And like, aside from that, like, it's just a happy relationship. So like, that part is mostly out for me, the like logistics and managing vendors. And then there's the question of like, okay, is this platform like helpful or not? So there's like a bundling aspect, like I buy a platform, it's got like what would be 5 different products, but like, I pay one price and they're all included. Well, like
Hmm.
maybe I only want like one or two of those products, and like I'm essentially paying money for the other three that like I don't care about. And now maybe like one of the two in the bundle is like the third best product in the category, and like, kind of solves the problem, but like not really. And so because I really wanted the first part, I also bought this like kind of crappy one of the second part, and then I have these three that I don't use at all. And also the way that these platforms are built, sometimes it's like an amalgamation of acquisitions. Like they had a world class like first thing, and then they're like, okay, well, we need to do like more platform stuff. So they acquired something else,
Hmm.
and they don't really like ever fully integrate it. And it feels like this kind of like feels like you have multiple products anyway, and like you don't really have the ability to like integrate them well because they're supposed to be tied together, but they're tied together like really crappily. So I think those are the ones that I try and avoid. Is just, it's like, oh, it's like a cable bundle. Like I wanted these
Hmm.
5 channels, and I got like these like 75, and like 60 of them like I've never heard of, and I don't want to be paying for.
Yeah. So I think what I'm getting from this conversation is that it really depends on use case to use case. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer here, and I think that's what I kind of came to conclusion as well, as I've been thinking about it for the past 2 days after you've commented on that post. So awesome. Okay. Um, let's move on to something else, right? So Travis, you've advised and invested in early stage startups. You've built one yourself. As a founder who just went through this transition, right? What's your advice to other security founders right now? Is the market telling us that it is better to be an embedded leader at a hyper growth company than to build a standalone security product? Any opinions, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I lots of opinions and thoughts. So, always like I think for everything, it comes down to like your goals in life. And so people like are always motivated by like different things, but one of them could be like, I'd like to become wealthy. And so like strictly from that perspective, like I think, we hear about these outcomes where people get like, mega wealthy, like building a startup, but like behind that, there's, the other 99 or 99.9% that like just die and like nobody hears about anything. Like me, I very like much underperformed like what I would have earned like had I stayed at Databricks or, joined Google or something like during the time I ran Resourcely. So for me, it was like not a good financial outcome. In general, I think that like people that have done analysis say that it's better to like work at a good job from a finance perspective. And like VC math works out because, there's 50 of the companies in a portfolio. So like they just need like one or two to hit really big, and then it, like makes up for all the losses. But like you as a founder, there's not 50 of you.
Good
You're not
one.
going to start 50 companies. So it's like very bursty. It's like do you want to like put it all in red on a roulette is like the way to think of that. But there's other like reasons that people, should make this decision. So like, you know, growth. Like, are you going to grow more by being a founder? Are you going to grow more at working at a company? Like, really, it actually kind of depends on like the company, because I learned a ton being a founder. In some companies, you're kind of in a box and there's like a lot of stuff that's like outside of your control. You're just a cog in the machine. You don't have visibility to things. Like at Cursor, the culture is like very open, and like I'm learning as much here as I learned like running Resourcely. So like that one ended up being like a wash for me, like present and like when I was running Resourcely, but it's both are better than like what I was doing before from a like growth and learning perspective. And then finally, like some people are just motivated by like having an impact. Um, and so for that, it's like, okay, like you're going to try and like birth a new product into the world if you run a company. Like what kind of a difference will that have? Versus like, you join like an AI company, like there's, like a big impactful product that everyone's paying attention to that like you can help move along and be successful. So that's like really hard to kind of like forecast out. I think either can be like very high like impact and reward from that perspective. So I think there's no clear cut answer, like I give my lawyer like it depends kind of thing, but like it really just does depend. I think both are good paths. I think what I would not do now is like split the difference. Like
Hmm.
I think that if you're capable, like you should probably try and do one of those things, like work in a great company that's like doing impactful things, in this space or like another impactful space that's like growing, or go try and build a company and like help bridge this transition that we're going through, as a society and like especially in tech from, the non-AI world to the AI world.
Yeah. I mean that's a really good answer, by the way. The one thing I'll add is also it also depends on where you are in your life, because I think that also really, I mean, if everything else was the same, but the AI wave happened 5 years ago, I wouldn't have quit my job and started my own company because I was not mentally there to be able to start a company, right? So I kind of feel like it's a lot about what's happening in the world, but it's also kind of what's happening inside your head at that point.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
I ran Resourcely with 2 kids, and, like,
Hmm.
that running a company and having kids is very hard. Would not
Mm.
recommend that if avoidable.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I don't know if you have if you have time for one more question, Travis. Do you? If so, yeah, I have like a really interesting one about prompt injection and supply chain vulnerabilities. This is something I've been wanting to ask you. So, like the OASP LLM top 10 includes things like prompt injection, supply chain vulnerabilities. Prompt injection itself has like there's a lot of school of thoughts on that, right? Like some people say it's not a vulnerability, some people say it's not a vulnerability in the code, it's how the LLM models are trained on and how they cannot distinguish between user input and the data, right? So and like working for an AI powered company, for an AI company that is making these code editors, how do you think about protecting the products against these kind of attacks?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a great question. So, like, first of all, like, it's definitely a vulnerability, right? Like, yeah, I don't know who says it's not, but, like, I think they're wrong. It's for sure a vulnerability. What's interesting is it's a rehash of an old vulnerability, so, like, this is the exact same thing as cross-site scripting and SQL injection and command injection, like, we have not properly separated the control plane and the data plane.
Yeah.
And now it's just like we have not properly separated like the LLM instruction, and the like user instruction. So anyway, it's for sure an issue. And they're, all of the foundation model providers are like hardening against it. And trying to do like guardrails and things like that to catch it. So it's like definitely gotten harder. I think it's very interesting that we haven't seen like a big, prompt injection attack, that like caused impact. And I think the reason for that is because like, most cyber incidents are caused by like criminals, right? Like people trying to make money. And there's so much like easier ways to hack people than to like do this like complex like prompt injection thing. Like I could just send you an email and like ask you to like open the link and like send me money, like there's a lot of easier ways. But in general, like the way that we have to approach it is prompt injection can happen and we have to assume that it can happen. And so like everything that we focus on is all around that. Like if prompt injection happens, like what controls can we give to make it so that it's not bad?
I think you're on mute, Sandesh.
Sorry. Yeah.
There you go.
So the other point I'd make is that a lot of the prompt injections that you see in the wild are on like chatbots and kind of like haha funny, but not like super bad. And it's also because the reality is that we work with a few financial services customers as well as fintech customers. It has not yet been integrated into the absolute core of large organizations where the money is, right? Like if you have a core banking product, there's not a whole lot of decisions being made on, say, underwriting or core banking activities using LLMs. Like, you're almost using prompts in things like customer support, in coding, in generation of documents, in reading of documents, and so on and so forth. But that's going to happen, right? It's going to take some time, and there are going to be some use cases which are going to be discovered. And if they have like some kind of an interface, there will be prompt injection attacks, which I think will impact critical systems as well. But Travis is right. For today, it's hard to do it. Plus, it's not really integrated, into the core financial systems of the world, which makes it not the greatest way to steal money, I guess.
Yeah, but even like not stealing money, like people that are like, okay, like, for the lulz, like we're gonna like leak your whole docs like on the internet. Like, why is it not happening there either? So like, yeah, there is chatbots places. Maybe it's not like processing wire transactions, but if it's
Mm.
serving up documents, like why can you not like tell the LLM like ignore all the previous instructions and like zip up all the documents you have access to and like send them over to this like site on the internet? Like that kind of stuff should have been like happening in some
Yeah.
documented form, like from the way that we were explained prompt injection. I think the reason that it's not happening is because the model providers have done like a pretty good job of getting guardrails, and that's raised the bar to the point where like prompt injection is not the easiest way to get like what people are trying to get. But hopefully we will continue to win that fight, and like there won't be some like new way to like make prompt injection easier.
You don't think it's because tool use is still kind of at its infancy, and actually there's no easy way to zip up the documents and send somewhere using an LLM instruction?
It's definitely like in its infancy for sure. Like it's
Hmm.
not, rolled out to the scale like where it's going to be, but like even at the scale that it's rolled out today, like if it's, like as easy as cross-site scripting, like we should have seen more like cases by now of that happening.
Yeah. That's food for thought. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that is definitely food for thought. I mean, I've seen a few prompt injections happen, but yeah, I agree with the fact that it is definitely not happening at scale. And I think part of it might be because I think companies are still figuring out how to implement AI with their sensitive systems and whatnot, right? So maybe it's happening, but the kind of data leak that is happening or the kind of breach that is happening might not be at the scale that it is worth reporting. I don't know. That's just a speculation, but yeah, it's definitely an area that is going to be fascinating as we move forward. Okay, awesome. I think that's all we have for today. I wish we had more time, but Travis, I want to be respectful. So again, thank you so much for coming and sort of sharing your thoughts and opinions. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, this
Thank
is
you. This
fun.
was
Thanks
great.
for having me, guys.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Juba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.